It's funny how life reshapes itself when you least expect it. My name is Emily, I'm 36, and I share a modest apartment in Seattle with my 10-year-old daughter, Sophia, the brightest light in my world. Raising her on my own wasn't part of the original plan, but somehow I've managed, more resilient, more guarded, and completely devoted to protecting her. There was a time when things looked different. I was married then, caught in the exhausting cycle of trying to salvage a relationship with a man who barely acknowledged my presence. When Sophia turned 5, he began to fade, first emotionally, then physically, until all that was left were unsigned words on a divorce agreement and an empty seat at our dinner table. No warnings, no closure, just the brutal clarity that some people are never meant to stay, no matter how much you hope otherwise. His absence didn't allow room for collapse. Sophia needed stability, and I had no choice but to provide it. What started as a calming hobby, baking to soothe my anxiety, soon became a necessity. I transformed our kitchen into a makeshift bakery. Cinnamon buns, lemon-glazed cookies, rich chocolate brownies. I sold them through a local app and slowly built a small, loyal customer base. I wasn't making a fortune, but I was creating something honest, something that belonged to me. While Sophia and I created a comforting routine, my connection with my family remained distant. My parents, Margaret and Richard, disapproved of the divorce. To them, being left meant I had somehow failed. They had always seen me as the delicate one, too quiet, too invisible, never quite enough. And then there was Ryan, my younger brother. He was the favorite, the success story, the one who made them proud. I used to think he didn't understand how it felt to be overshadowed. But I came to realize he did, and he didn't mind. Despite the emotional gap, we kept up appearances. There were birthday gatherings, holiday meals, and family events I couldn't entirely avoid. Mostly, I showed up for Sophia. She still believed family meant something. A week ago, a fancy gold-rimmed envelope arrived, delivered by hand. It was an invitation to Ryan's engagement celebration, a rooftop soiree in Los Angeles, formal dress required. The message had clearly been written by my mother, not Ryan. I stared at it for what felt like hours, debating whether I should go. But when Sophia heard the word party, her whole face lit up. "Do you think they'll be happy to see us?" she asked, eyes wide with hope. I tucked a curl behind her ear and smiled gently. "We'll go," I said, not because I believed anyone would be glad to see us, but because Sophia deserved to witness grace, love, and self-respect in action. The days leading up to the event were quiet but purposeful. Sophia chatted endlessly about the rooftop. Would there be balloons? A chocolate fountain? She was still young enough to believe this time might be different. That maybe, just maybe, the gathering would feel like warmth instead of judgment. I spent 2 evenings after work baking a fresh batch of vanilla cookies with lemon glaze, my signature treat, light and sweet, just like Sophia. I packed them carefully in a white box tied with a golden ribbon. It wasn't extravagant, but it was thoughtful, something I knew wouldn't be noticed, but that didn't matter. On the morning of the party, Sophia chose a soft blue dress sprinkled with tiny embroidered stars. She spun in front of the mirror and asked, "Do you think Uncle Ryan will like it?" I paused, choosing my words. He might be too busy to notice, love, but I think it's beautiful, and that's what counts. She beamed, content. I wore a plain gray blouse with black trousers, simple, neat, and comfortable. My hair was tied back in a low bun. I wasn't dressing to compete. I was going because I'd been invited, and I refused to let anyone's silence make me feel unwelcome. We reached the rooftop venue just before sunset. The tall building offered a dramatic view of Los Angeles, and the elevator ride made Sophia giggle and cover her ears. When the doors opened, it was like stepping into another reality. Glass walls surrounded the space, revealing a skyline bathed in golden light. White roses lined the entrance. A soft jazz melody played in the background. Servers in black waistcoats moved among the guests with trays of champagne and delicate desserts. Everything about it was curated, polished, performative, the kind of event where expressions are practiced and laughter is for show. Then I saw them, my parents. They stood near a marble table covered with an elegant charcuterie board. My mother wore a deep burgundy gown with a diamond necklace I didn't recognize. My father looked formal and composed, like he'd just left a political gala. Ryan stood in the center of the crowd with his fiancée, Jessica, stunning in an ivory silk dress, flawless makeup, poised like a magazine cover. Her smile was cool and reserved. Ryan, all charm and perfect posture, was shaking hands like a man on the campaign trail. No one acknowledged our arrival. Not a glance. Not a nod. Nothing. Sophia leaned toward me and whispered, "They didn't see us." "Oh, they saw us," I murmured. "They're just pretending they didn't." Before I could say more, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Emily." I turned and smiled as Olivia, my college best friend, stepped forward. She was working part-time with a catering company handling the event. Her face softened when she spotted us. "You look amazing," she said, giving me a warm hug. "I didn't know you'd be here," I replied. "I wasn't sure I'd come," I confessed. "Well," she said, smiling, "I'm really glad you did." She gave a small smile. "Keep your chin up. There's more ego floating around this place than air tonight." I gave a quick nod, already feeling the weight of unspoken judgment prickling against my skin like an invisible current. Sophia, blissfully unaware of the rising tension surrounding us, walked ahead, her attention caught by an open seat beside a flower-laden stage where Jessica's name gleamed in gold. She didn't realize it was meant for someone else. She had no idea of the reaction it would trigger, but I did. I felt it building, waiting to explode. With delicate, innocent steps, Sophia moved toward the empty chair positioned right near the stage, where the grand golden letters J and T sparkled under the floral arch. To her, it likely seemed like the ideal place, close to the music, the desserts, the magic. She glanced back at me with a shy smile before quietly sitting, her hands folded politely in her lap. I was only a few steps behind when I caught the look, Ryan's sharp stare, locked onto Sophia like a laser. His posture stiffened as he excused himself from a small group of sharply dressed men and made a beeline toward her. His smile, polished and professional just moments earlier, dropped the instant he thought no one of importance was watching. He stopped in front of Sophia, towering above her. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked, his tone low but pointed enough to catch attention. Sophia looked up, puzzled. I just sat down," she murmured. "That seat isn't for you," he snapped, louder this time. "It's reserved for Jessica's maid of honor. You don't get to come here and act like this event revolves around you." I froze mid-step, watching the scene play out like a terrible dream materializing in slow motion. Sophia stood abruptly, her face turning red with embarrassment. "I didn't know," she whispered. Ryan didn't stop. "You don't belong here." "Ryan," I called out as I stepped forward quickly. "She's a child. There's no reason to speak to her like that." He turned to me, his jaw tight. "Then control your child." Before I could respond, the click of heels echoed across the rooftop, sharp, deliberate. Margaret was approaching fast, her face expressionless, carved in stone. The deep red gown she wore swayed as she moved, her eyes already narrowed in judgment, the same look she reserved for me. But this time, it was aimed at my daughter. She just sat in a reserved chair. I explained quickly, placing myself between Sophia and my mother. She didn't know. Margaret didn't care. Her voice sliced through the air. "She's 10, not a toddler," she spat. "You've raised her just like yourself, no respect, no understanding of limits." And then, she did something I never imagined. She lunged forward, grabbed a fistful of Sophia's curls, and yanked her head back. Sophia let out a cry, stunned, scared. Before I could move, Margaret's hand flew across her cheek in a loud, open-handed slap that cracked through the silence like thunder. Everything stopped. The chatter, the laughter, even the music seemed to vanish into stunned silence. Glasses froze midair, conversations died half-spoken. I caught Sophia as she staggered, her hand flying to her cheek, eyes wide in disbelief. My legs nearly buckled, but my voice was solid. "You just struck my daughter." In front of everyone. Margaret didn't blink. Maybe now she'll understand her place. I couldn't wrap my head around it, that my own mother, Sophia's grandmother, had hit her, and somehow believed it was justified. "What's wrong with you?" I shouted. "She humiliated us," Ryan added coldly. "Just like you always do." That's when Richard arrived. Calm, distant. As emotionless as always. He glanced at Sophia, still weeping quietly in my arms, then at me, and said flatly, "Take your daughter and leave." I searched his face for a flicker of empathy. Nothing. Just agreement. Cold and final. Olivia, who had dropped her serving tray nearby, stood off to the side. Her face pale, her phone clutched tightly in one hand. "I just need a moment," I said, my voice shaking. "No," Margaret interrupted, stepping forward again, her hand raised like she dared me to protest. "You've done enough." Seconds later, 2 security guards walked up. "Ma'am, we've been asked to escort you out." I didn't resist. I bent down, lifted Sophia gently into my arms. She clung to me, her fingers curled into my blouse, tears soaking through the fabric. I held my head high as I walked past the guests, none of whom said a word. Half-empty champagne glasses hovered in their hands, eyes darting away, mouths silent. And that silence cut deeper than the slap. The elevator ride down felt like it lasted a lifetime. Sophia pressed her face into my shoulder, no longer crying, just trembling, breathing in short, shallow bursts. Too shaken to speak. I rubbed her back slowly, whispering, "You're safe now, sweetheart. I've got you. I promise." My heart was pounding, so loud I was sure she could feel it. I wasn't even angry yet. Shock had numbed everything. All I could sense was her pain, her confusion, her heartbreak. Outside, the warm Los Angeles air hit us like a wave. I sat on the edge of the curb, Sophia cradled in my lap, our clothes wrinkled and stained with the weight of what had happened. I glanced back toward the building, half expecting anyone to follow. But no one came. No one would. Until, "Hey," a soft voice called from behind. I turned and saw Olivia approaching, still in her catering uniform. She looked torn between fury and sorrow, phone still in hand, purse slung over her shoulder. "I saw everything," she said gently, kneeling down beside me. I recorded it, Emily. I didn't know what else to do." "You what?" I blinked. "I started filming when Ryan yelled at Sophia. I didn't expect your mom to," her voice broke. "But I have it all. The words. The slap. The way no one stepped in." She extended her phone toward me. The screen displayed a frozen moment in time, Margaret's hand midair, Sophia pulling away and Ryan watching without a shred of concern. I didn't hit play. Not right away. Instead, I turned to my daughter. Her face was blotchy, her cheeks tinged with leftover redness, but her eyes, those had changed. Open, alert, no longer innocent. "They really think they can treat us like this and just get away with it," Sophia said quietly, her voice small but steady. "No, sweetheart," I whispered, nodding slowly. "They shouldn't be allowed to." Olivia glanced between us. "What do you want to do?" she asked. I looked upward for a moment, searching the sky as if the answer had been waiting there all along. The answer to years of silence and held-back pain. "We tell the truth," I said calmly. Without hesitation, Olivia handed me the video file. "I already sent you a copy," she said. "Whatever you decide. I'm behind you." I looked at Sophia again. She wasn't just a little girl anymore. Something within her had shifted. She had witnessed cruelty at the hands of those meant to protect her, and yet she sat there, composed, refusing to shrink under it. We walked back to our hotel, without speaking. Sophia carried the small white box of cookies we had brought, now untouched, holding it like it still meant something, like kindness still had value, even if no one had recognized it. That night, after she had changed into her pajamas and curled up in bed beside me, I remained seated at the edge of the mattress. The room was dim, lit only by the dull glow of my phone screen. I opened the video and watched. It was all there. Ryan's harsh voice. Margaret's violent slap. Sophia's shocked cry. My father's stone-faced command. Every cruel second captured and undeniable. Rage stirred in my chest, but even more powerful than the anger was clarity. I turned and saw Sophia lying quietly, her eyes still open, staring up at the ceiling. Mom, are we going to do something? She whispered. I nodded. Yes, baby. We are. With one breath, one finger tap, and a single tear slipping down my cheek, I uploaded the video. No caption. No trimming. No music. No context. Just the raw truth, exactly as it happened because it didn't need explanation. I posted it from a barely used private account I had once created on a parenting forum. Olivia helped me adjust the privacy settings. Within the first hour, it had a few dozen views, mostly from moms who followed Olivia's catering page. By morning, the number had soared past 50,000. By lunchtime, it had surpassed 250,000. I sat silently at the hotel room's table, watching the counter rise, while Sophia sat on the bed behind me, picking at a dry croissant from room service.
I told her the video was online.
She just gave a small nod. Neither of us said much. We didn't need to. That afternoon, hashtags began to emerge. Hashtag justice for Maya. Hashtag slap caught on camera. Hashtag toxic family unmasked. Parenting groups, anti-bullying platforms, and school counselors' pages began sharing the clip. Some captions read, "What kind of grandmother does this? Look at that little girl's face. Look at her mother's strength." By evening, the inboxes were overflowing, messages from reporters, podcast hosts, legal advocates, women's rights groups, even a well-known daytime show's assistant. I ignored them all. This wasn't about attention. It was about Sophia. She needed to know what accountability looked like. That night, she stood in front of the hotel mirror in her pajamas. Her cheek was no longer red, but I knew the sting was still there inside. "Do you think people will believe us?" she asked softly. I turned the screen toward her and showed her a message from a teacher in Ohio. "To the little girl in this video, you're not alone. And to the mother who protected her, you're the kind of parent I hope to be." Sophia read it once, then again. And she smiled, not because everything was suddenly better, but because something had shifted. They tried to crush her. Instead, they ignited a fire. 2 days later, the real fallout began. Olivia called me first. "You might want to sit down," she said. Ryan's company had issued a formal statement. They were launching an internal review after a now-viral incident involving one of their senior executives. By the following morning, it was official. Ryan had been terminated, effective immediately. Then came Jessica. She posted a short, frosty video wearing large sunglasses and a bare ring finger. I had no idea what I was entering when I agreed to be part of this family. I've seen the footage. I've heard their silence. I want no part of that kind of cruelty. The engagement is off. I didn't cheer. I didn't even smile. This wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, piercing through the image they'd fought so hard to protect. But the moment that finally let me exhale came later that evening. 2 police officers showed up at our hotel room. "Miss Emily," one said gently, "we've seen the video. We'd like to officially take your statement." I looked over at Sophia, seated quietly on the couch in her hoodie, holding her little stuffed fox. "Can she stay with me during this?" I asked. The officer smiled. "Of course. She's the reason we're here." And in that instant I knew the silence that had defined so much of our past was finally broken. Filing the report felt like dragging my feet through wet cement. But I did it. I told them everything. How Margaret had yanked Sophia's hair and slapped her across the face. How Ryan had watched, smug and unbothered. How Richard had ordered us out like we were trash in their perfect picture. How no one, not a single one of them, stepped forward to stop it. The officers listened closely. One of them, a young woman, paused at the door before leaving and said softly, "You did the right thing. I'm a mom too." By the following morning, the video had surpassed 10 million views. It wasn't just viral, it had become national news. Morning shows, primetime anchors, and major networks were now talking about it. But the narrative had grown beyond our family. It had sparked broader conversations about domestic violence, generational harm, and the blurred lines between parenting and abuse. Even as the public outcry grew louder, Margaret remained unmoved. She offered no apology, issued no statement, not even a feeble denial. She acted as though silence could shield her. But the justice system didn't wait. 3 days later, she was officially taken into custody and charged with child abuse. Police officers arrived at her private residence, escorted her past flashing cameras, and placed her in a squad car as reporters captured every second. The arrest footage was played across media platforms, often paired with Jessica's now famous voiceover. "I refuse to marry into cruelty." Ryan attempted to salvage what was left of his reputation by posting a generic apology online, just typed words without emotion, but it backfired instantly. Screenshots began circulating of private conversations where he had mocked the situation, making light of Sophia's pain. The company that had fired him followed up with a second public announcement. He would not be eligible for future projects or partnerships. Meanwhile, the court issued a formal restraining order against Margaret. She was legally prohibited from contacting either me or Sophia in any way. Her sentencing was set for 2 weeks out. But justice didn't stop with her. My father, Richard, had remained completely silent, watching everything from the shadows, as he always had. No remorse, no acknowledgement. But the law didn't let him slip by. When we testified in court against Margaret, the judge turned her gaze directly on him. "You witnessed this event," she said firmly. "You took no action to intervene. That is not neutrality. That is negligence. And in this courtroom, silence is not the same as innocence." The judge ordered him to perform community service and attend a court-mandated class on bystander responsibility. He didn't argue. He didn't even speak. For the first time in my life, I realized I no longer wanted anything from him, not even closure. That day in court felt almost surreal. Sophia sat beside me, her small hand wrapped in mine. She wore a soft pink dress and a tiny barrette in her hair, the same one from the engagement party. Across from us sat Margaret in a slate gray suit, unmoving, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. But when the judge read her sentence, 6 months in county jail and compulsory anger management counseling, something in her hardened expression finally fractured. Not guilt, not regret, just shock. As if, for the first time, someone had looked her in the eye and said no, and meant it. Outside the courthouse, a small group had gathered. Mothers, advocates, supporters. One woman walked up to Sophia, knelt down, and handed her a single sunflower. "For being brave," she said, "and for saying what others couldn't." Sophia looked up at me and whispered, "I didn't say that much." I smiled and hugged her close. "You didn't have to. The truth said enough." The next morning, my phone lit up with a message from a number I hadn't saved, but I recognized it instantly. It was Ryan. "We need to talk. You've taken this too far. You've destroyed everything." I stared at the message, not angry, just exhausted. This was the cycle I knew too well.
Deflect. Blame.
Pretend truth was betrayal. They couldn't see what they had done to Sophia as violence. To them, silence was loyalty. Speaking out was treason. I didn't reply. Later that same day, a certified letter arrived by courier. Not a reconciliation. A formal request. An invitation to attend a private resolution meeting organized by Richard. The location: a law office in Beverly Hills. "For the sake of family peace," the letter read. I almost laughed. But I went, not for harmony, but for closure. The conference room was sterile and polished, as emotionless as the people who had summoned me. The floor was marble, the air heavily perfumed with formality. A legal mediator sat at one end of the glossy table. I sat at the other. Sophia waited in a nearby lounge with Olivia. Margaret wasn't present. She was still in custody. Richard sat rigidly across from me, eyes fixed on the table. Ryan was already pacing, arms folded, bloodshot eyes betraying sleepless nights and spiraling control. Jessica, of course, wasn't there. She never would be again. Ryan spoke first, his voice sharp and full of resentment. You've embarrassed the entire family. What kind of sister does that? I didn't flinch. I said nothing. He slammed his palm against the table. You could have handled this quietly, like how Sophia's humiliation was handled quietly. I asked, my voice even. He fell silent. Margaret's absence lingered like smoke in the room. Richard finally cleared his throat. Emily, we all made mistakes. No, I said, cutting him off. You watched. You did nothing. And now you want forgiveness without ever offering an apology. The mediator started to speak, but I raised a hand. I didn't come to bargain, I said calmly. I came to say what needed to be said. I turned to Richard. You lost your granddaughter the moment you chose silence over her suffering. Then I faced Ryan. You lost your job, your fiancé, your polished image. But what really broke you was the truth. I stood up, pushing my chair back without a sound. Ryan muttered something behind me, but I didn't look back. The meeting was done not legally, but in every way that mattered. As I exited the glass-paneled building under the cloudless Beverly Hills sky, I spotted Sophia near the car, Olivia by her side. She looked so small and calm, watching birds glide above the palm trees. She saw me, smiled, and waved. And something deep inside me, something tight and painful, finally let go. Not bitterness. Not vengeance. Just release. That evening, Jessica posted one final update. A quiet photo from inside a bookstore. She held up a parenting book in one hand, her face peaceful, her caption simple. Hashtag, peace looks like this. And for the first time, I thought,
Yes.
Yes, it does. 3 weeks after the courthouse doors closed behind us for the last time, I packed up everything we owned into 4 cardboard boxes and 3 worn-out suitcases. 12 years in Seattle had been long enough. I had memorized the pattern of rain on the windows, knew the grocery store shelves like second nature, and exchanged polite nods with neighbors who never asked much. But routine wasn't healing, it was just survival. What we needed was room to exhale, to begin again somewhere untouched by memories or silence. That's how we landed in Ashland, Oregon. A little town tucked between soft hills and wide-open skies. The streets were lined with flower baskets and art galleries, and strangers smiled at you just for walking past. No one cared about brands or resumes here, only that you said thank you and held the door for the person behind you. We arrived in early spring. Sophia barely spoke during the drive, her gaze fixed out the window, silently counting trees and clouds like she was tracing the shape of peace. Our new place was simple, a 2-bedroom rental with a porch that caught the sunset and wind chimes that sang in the breeze. It wasn't polished, but it was quiet. There were no slamming doors. No harsh tones muffled through the walls. Only birdsong, wind, and space. I started small again, just as I had once before, with flour, sugar, and a little faith. I rolled out a bakery cart near the farmer's market with a handwritten sign that read, "Sweet Start by Emily." At first, people stopped by out of curiosity. Then they came back for the cinnamon rolls that sold out by noon and the raspberry cookies that made kids tug on their parents' sleeves. A woman asked if I catered for weddings. No one asked about my history. They only asked if I took custom orders. Sophia started at a new school the following week. She wore a bright yellow backpack and a smile that looked more real than it had in months. That Friday, she came home with a certificate crinkled from her backpack, Student of the Month. "I'm kind," she said, pointing to the note her teacher had written. "You always were," I told her, brushing her curls from her eyes. Our days found a rhythm, not one of survival, but of actual living. Each morning, we opened the windows and named birds. We baked. We smiled more. In the evenings, we walked to the park for soft ice cream and softer conversations. Olivia still called from Los Angeles. "You better have that kitchen ready," she teased. "I want a dozen of everything." We laughed together, not because life was perfect, but because it was ours now. One night, wrapped in blankets on the porch, Sophia watched fireflies blink across the yard. She leaned into me and whispered, "Do you think they miss us?" I paused. I thought about Ryan, about Margaret, about Richard, still cloaked in their quiet, curated world. Maybe, I said. Does that mean they were good to us? No, I answered gently. Missing someone doesn't mean they were good for you. She nodded, absent-mindedly running her fingers along the fringe of the blanket. I like it here, she said. I do too, I replied. It's quiet, but kind. I looked up at the stars and whispered something just for me. They never loved us. But the world still has room for our kind of light. And for the first time, I believed it. Weeks went by. Slowly, the echoes of our past began to sound more like distant thunder, something that had moved on, leaving clear skies in its wake. In Ashland, no one saw me as the woman from that viral video. I was just Emily, the one who sold warm almond croissants by the side of the highway. And Sophia? She became the girl who sat under the maple tree at recess, who helped classmates with their math, who doodled stars in the corners of her notebooks. She had finally grown into herself, not changed, but revealed. My little bakery cart began to flourish faster than I had hoped. Locals called in orders ahead of time. A nearby cafe asked to carry my scones. I started receiving small event requests, birthdays, bake sales, even a library fundraiser. When someone complimented my pastries, I always said thank you. But what I meant was, you see me now. Just me. Without the filter of failure or family shadows. That felt like magic. One afternoon, Sophia burst through the front door, cheeks flushed and out of breath. She held up a handmade card covered in glitter and lopsided hearts. It's for my teacher, she beamed. Inside it read, "Thank you for raising a child who is gentle, thoughtful, and brave." I read it 3 times, not because I was surprised, but because it finally felt real. This was who Sophia was always meant to be. And this was who I was meant to be, standing beside her. Not perfect, not loud, but present.
Steady. Free.
That weekend, we planted sunflowers in the backyard. Sophia pressed each seed into the earth with her thumbs and whispered to the dirt, "Grow strong." I knelt beside her, smiling. Just like you. Later that night, sipping cocoa on the porch with our eyes half closed from sleep, she asked, "Do you think we'll ever see them again?" The question didn't carry weight, just quiet curiosity. Maybe, I said, honest. But we'll never go back to how it was. Not ever. She leaned her head against my arm. Good. I like who we are now. So did I. Because we weren't just surviving anymore. We were blooming, in a place no one expected us to. And the versions of ourselves that used to shrink in family portraits? The girl who waited to be noticed, and the woman who stood in the corner of her own life, they were gone. Now it was just us. Us, and a field of fireflies, blinking like small reminders from the universe, whispering, "Keep going. You're finally home." It had been almost a full year since Sophia and I turned the page on Seattle and everything we'd left behind. 12 months since that rooftop night, where it all fell apart, and somehow, everything finally began. Ashland had become our quiet miracle. What started as a humble cart under a tree near the farmer's market had grown into a cozy little bakery tucked at the corner of 3rd and Maple. The storefront was painted in soft teal, with wooden flower boxes under each window. The sign above the door still read, "Sweet Start by Emily." But now, people didn't just drop by for cookies. They came for warmth, for comfort, for the kind of kindness that lingers long after you've left the shop. The kind you only find when someone sees you, not as a burden or a mistake, but as someone who brings something beautiful into the world. The local paper ran a story on us as part of their Women of Ashland series. The headline made me laugh out loud. "Single mom, full heart, how a baker and her daughter brought light to our town." Sophia cut it out and taped it beside her bed. "You're famous now," she teased. I grinned. "So are you, 3-time Student of the Month." She smiled wide, missing front tooth and all. It was growing back, slowly, steadily. Just like us. Spring gave way to summer, and the town came alive like a long-kept secret finally whispered into bloom. Each evening, Sophia and I would curl up on our front porch, sipping lemonade and watching the town wind down. Farmers folding up tents. Lights blinking off in the bookstore. Fireflies drifting like tiny glowing wishes in the dusk air. And somewhere in all of it, a realization settled quietly inside me. I never needed my old family to feel complete. I just needed to believe that Sophia and me were already enough. And we were. One Sunday, we threw a small celebration outside the bakery. Free cupcakes, local music, a raffle for the school library fund. Olivia surprised us by driving in from LA with balloons, stories, and a brand new apron that read, "Head Pastry Queen." We hugged until we laughed until we cried, and cried until all that remained was joy. As the sun dipped behind the trees and the music drifted into the air, Sophia tugged gently on my sleeve. "Look," she whispered, pointing toward the edge of the lawn. A small cluster of fireflies blinked in a slow, glowing rhythm. Dozens of them, twinkling all at once. More than we had ever seen in a single night. "Do you think it's a sign?" she asked, eyes wide with wonder. I knelt beside her and brushed a soft curl from her cheek. "I think," I said, "it's the world letting us know we're seen." And as the music played and the stars above pulsed like old friends returning home, I wrapped my arm around the bravest soul I'd ever known. "They didn't love us," I whispered into her hair. "But the world still has space for the kind of light we carry." And for the first time in forever, we didn't just feel safe. We felt celebrated. We were no longer waiting to be chosen by people who never saw us clearly. We had chosen each other. And that was the sweetest chapter of all.